Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison, and I'm a senior program manager here at Microsoft inside of Cloud and AI. And what I want to do this morning, or at least morning my time, is something a little bit different. Definitely a different style from what we've done as a team. Certainly from what I've done in the past. Some of you may know me from various edX and MVA courses and so forth. And that's really, I think, kind of a bit more of a real world exploration of doing software development. That in all of my time of going out and teaching, one of the biggest questions that I always get asked is, how do we dig deeper? How do we go from here? And the answer to that is very much just get in and start doing it. And the way that you're going to get in and start doing it is you're going to start to peruse docs, and you're going to experiment, and you're going to look for blog posts and things like that. And that really is actually a skill, and it's how we as real world developers actually, create everything. So let's go ahead and broadcast that. Let's go ahead and do this. And that's exactly what I'm going to be doing today. So this is at the moment we're calling it Code and Coffee, and it's really just designed to be a bit of an informal, hey, let's go in and start writing some code. Let's go ahead and start playing with things. Let's go ahead, and for those of you who enjoy coffee, drink coffee. And just kind of play around. And so what that means is that there's going to be a little bit of a structure. Like, I have a couple of goals of things that I want to be able to build and accomplish today inside of Django. But based on questions and how things go, we might wind up going a different direction. And it's possible things might fail. And you're going to notice that I'm going to be looking things up because, again, this is real world. This is like how developers actually write code. And so I want to hopefully also then show some nice little resources and where you can continue to go as you continue to explore. So the other big thing that I want to mention here is the fact that we do have a chat window here. Please, by all means, ask questions. Let me let me know what it is that you're thinking, and otherwise, as you can tell by kind of the mess behind me as I'm broadcasting from my office here, that again, this is really designed to be informal. So let's go ahead and give it a whirl here. So good morning. So let's start chatting here. So what I want to do this morning over the next couple of hours is I want to build out a web application using Django that could, in theory, and I just want to say good morning to everybody over there. But it is still morning right here in Pacific time zone, west coast of the U.S., Seattle, Washington. But yeah, so what I want to do this morning is I want to start to create a pet adoption app. If you know anything about me, you know that I'm proudly the parent of a quote-unquote four-legged child. We have a rescue dog. She's mostly Amstaff with like a little bit of lab and a little bit of Boston Terrier, and definitely a whole lot of personality built into her. And if you want to see pictures, you can go look on my Twitter, go look on my Instagram, and see pictures of her there. But that really is a passion of mine. So I want to use that as a bit of a framework for going in and exploring Django. That if you're going to explore, I think, any type of framework, you need something to build. And so this is what it is that we're going to be building. So for the next 2 hours, this is really what I want to try and accomplish. Is I want to bootstrap the site using Django. I want to set up the initial models. So just like a little bit of basic structure. So we'll create like a dog, we'll create maybe breeds, we'll go ahead and create shelters, whatever it is that we might want. Then we'll go ahead and set up the initial database. We'll go ahead and create an admin user and start to explore a little bit of the data. We'll set up a couple of views. We'll set up a list view. We'll set up a details view. And that will be our main core like development. And we'll be doing all of that in like SQLite and things like that. And then we'll go ahead and set up a real database, get our application prepped for that. We'll go ahead and get everything ready for deployment. And then finally, we'll push everything out into Azure. So that's going to be the goal for the next 2 hours. As I highlighted at the outset here, we absolutely are going to go in and poke around inside of documentation. There's a couple of things that I want to show off inside of there. We are very likely going to make mistakes and have things go not quite the way that we were expecting. You will probably see me live debug. All of those different things are absolutely going to happen because we're really cooking here. Like we're really going to go in and write code. So let's talk a little bit about Django here. Which is going to be the framework that I'm going to choose for this application. And so the question becomes, well, why Django? Like why are we using Django? And the reason that we're using Django is because it's a great application for doing create, retrieve, update, delete. It's a great application for creating CRUD applications, the CRUD, CRUD applications. Because again, and I've said this many times, is when you think about it, a lot of the web applications that you're going to be playing around with are really going to be a front end to some back end database. And there's nothing new that we're ever trying to create. That as an old buddy of mine likes to say, we're not launching rockets here. Whatever it is that we're doing, somebody else has already done. So let's take advantage of what it is that somebody else has done. Let's take advantage of what it is that we've built. Like everybody's created a list view. Everybody's created a create form. Like this is something that every web developer has done. So rather than going in and doing that same thing over and over and over and over and over again, let's go ahead and take advantage of a framework that will do that tedium for us, and that way we can focus in on the actual problem space. So that way we're not having to start creating a whole bunch of SQL queries. We're not having to create a whole bunch of just like boilerplate code, that we can let a framework do it for us. Now, don't worry, like we're not necessarily pigeonholed here. If we want to go in and gussy things up and make things fancier and write code and do all of that, Django can absolutely support that. But the great advantage to Django is all of those little things that we don't necessarily want to have to worry about, Django will go ahead and take care of for us. And that's really why I'm a huge fan of Django. And that's also not to mention the fact that there's a fantastic community that exists around Django. There's a whole bunch of great little plugins and extensions and so forth that you can go out and get, because again, we're not launching rockets. A lot of people have had the same problems that you're having. So let's take advantage of what it is that they've built here. So I'm thrilled to see people coming in and saying hi from Poland, hi from the UK, hi from London. Hello, everybody. Good to see Steve's coming back here. I saw you the other day. That's fantastic. So yeah, let's Django. Cool. All right. So let's explore the website here just a little bit here. So what I want to do is I just want to open up the documentation page because this right here is actually one of my favorite parts about Django. its documentation is really fantastic. That if you start exploring in here, it's usually pretty quick to find whatever it is that you might be looking for. So for example, if you're trying to figure out like how some of the built-in views work, then you can go in and see all of that. Or if you're trying to figure out, hey, I want to go in and start creating models, like what are all my field types that are available to me and so forth, you can start to see all of that right here. If you want to declare like a primary key, if you want to specify the name of a database column, etc. Like you can start to see all of that right inside here, which I really like. So if you want to go in and set up, for example, like a many-to-many field, then you can indicate that right inside of here. Yeah, there's a comment here that mentions the well-written documentation better for Django than Flask. And don't get me wrong, I love Flask. I think Flask is a great lightweight framework that if you're just trying to get a website up and running quickly, then Flask is your perfect option. Like if you were here back a couple of days ago, or maybe you go in and you view the video later on, you might notice that it literally took me about 20 minutes to get to doing a simple hello world in Django. And yes, a big part of that was because I was talking an awful lot. But another part of that is because there actually is just like a little bit of setup that needs to be done with Django that doesn't need to be done with Flask, because Flask is such a lightweight framework. It very much is a just, hey, do whatever it is that you want. So it's a real quick, just install a package, like 5 lines of code, boom, I'm done. With Django, there's a bit more heavy lifting that needs to be done, that I need to install it. I need to set up a project and set up an app and write a bit of code and so forth, because Django is just not built for that. But with that, I am going to get a lot of additional functionality as well there. So yeah, that's a perfect question I see there. You know, why would I use Flask over Django? That's exactly it. That I spend a lot of time at like student hackathons, for example. I see a lot of students using Flask because of that very reason, just because it's a real light framework and it sort of gets out of the way. So cool. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and then start taking a look here. And I'm going to do all of my code inside Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to be honest with you here. The reason that I use Visual Studio Code is because I love Visual Studio Code. This has nothing to do with the fact that this is a Microsoft product. In fact, you're going to notice I'm doing Django here. So I'm obviously not tied to everything that is Microsoft for me, my own personal development, but I love Visual Studio Code. There's a lot of great functionality that's built into here. And one of the biggest, and I'm going to, I think it's off of the view as well. Yeah, I'm going to bring up a terminal window here. And I always do this with a shortcut key of just control backtick. And this is going to now bring up my, my terminal window. And this will then give me access to the command line, and I'll be able to do whatever it is that I want. Now, I also want to highlight here that I'm doing all of my dev work using WSL2, Windows Subsystem for Linux 2. And the reason that I use WSL2 is because Python is really built for Linux. And so being able to kind of run and work in Python in the environment that it was designed for, I think just makes things easier. I find less quirkiness when I'm doing things this way. So I really do like WSL2. For the time being, you are still going to need to set up your Windows into the Insider program. It's just a real quick little bit flip, and then you have to just wait for things to install. So for right now, you have to do it for WSL2, but it is going to be part of an upcoming release of Windows, and it is going to make things much better. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just sort of keeping an eye on the chat as well. I do want to call out Megan, who is one of my fantastic teammates. All of my teammates are fantastic, but she's one of my fantastic teammates. She's based out of the Bay Area, and she will also be answering your questions as well. I will say I do my actual dev in dark mode, but I find when I'm doing presentations that light mode just works a bit better. Oops. There we go. Why am I not? Control K, Control T. There we go. Apparently I was doing it wrong. But I find when I'm doing presentations, light mode just works better, which is why I like doing that. Okay, so let's see here. I'm going to just change directories into repos. I'm going to create a brand new directory here that I'm going to call Django pets, and then I'm going to cd into Django pets, just like that. Okay. Now, I can open that up inside of code, make sure that I'm opening that up as well. So I just hit File and Open Folder there, and then let's go ahead and Django Pets and hit OK. Somebody says they've never seen Visual Studio in light mode. Yeah, I was a light mode user for the longest time, and then I don't know, maybe about a year and a half ago, I switched over to dark mode, and honestly, it really it has helped out my my eyes quite a bit. And just kind of made things a little bit easier. Kind of makes it easier to kind of go for longer sessions of banging out code. Okay, now I am going to want to set up my requirements text file. And this is going to be where we're going to list off all of the different projects and so forth that we want for our application. So obviously we're going to want Django. I don't think I need to explain why it is that we're adding Django to our list of requirements. So there it is. The next one that we're going to want here is python.env, and this is for managing environmental variables. Environmental variables. So one of the big things that a lot of developers wind up doing, and I'll admit that I've done this many times in the past, is we wind up taking the easy route. We wind up just hard coding in usernames and passwords and keys and things like that. And obviously we shouldn't do that. Like, we all know that we're not supposed to do that, but yet we do it just because it's like, I just want to get this up and running right now. And it's easier. Let's just say it. It's easier just to hard code in string values, but we all know we're not supposed to do that. And that's why I really like using something like .env, which allows me, as we're going to see, to be able to offload those out to a separate text file and be able to pull them all in very easily by using just environmental variables. So it winds up, I'm loving the chat about light mode, dark mode, but it winds up making it very easy for me to offload all of those sensitive values. So hopefully then I won't just get lazy and just hard code it in string values. .env exists for, I think, every single language that's out there. The Python version is right here, python-.env, but it exists for .NET, for Node, etc. And then the other one that I'm going to need is a little thing called white noise. And this is going to be for my static files. And I'm going to highlight this towards the end. Like when we go to publish, I'm going to show what happens when we do this without white noise. And then I'm going to come back and show off how to fix that. Okay. Now, I am going to be a good developer here. So I'm going to say Python 3.8. venv, and yep. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm just creating a virtual environment for Python. If you're not familiar with a virtual environment for Python, basically makes it act an awful lot like Node, that it will now take all of my, all the Python packages and everything else and put them into a folder, so that way it's not going to be globally installed, so that way I don't have to worry about like versioning issues and things like that. So now let's go ahead and install everything. Install our requirements .txt. Cool, and this will just take a couple of seconds, a couple sips. Not even a sip, apparently. Okay, and so now there is my my install. Cool. Now, the way that that Django works here, I'm actually going to go back to the Django website and highlight this. Let me go back into my overview. Let's make sure that all that's coming up. Okay, I want documentation here, and I'm going to want the tutorial. So what you're going to notice on the tutorial here is that it's going to call out two initial commands here of start project and eventually chugga. There we go, start app. And what start project and start app will do for us is they will give us the ability to now bootstrap our application. So our project is going to wind up being the container for everything that we're going to wind up being doing. It's going to be the entry point for our website, and it's going to be where we're going to globally configure things and so forth. Meanwhile, our app is going to be where our code actually exists. So when we go in to add our models and things like that, we're going to do all of that inside of our app. And so fortunately, we've got a great little command line utility here called Django admin that will allow me to set all of that up. So I'm going to say start project here, and I'm going to give this a very basic name of Django. Actually, I'm going to say start project. What do I want to call it? I'm going to call it Django Pets. And then I'm going to end this here with a dot at the end. And that's just going to tell it to install in the current directory. If you don't do that, then what's going to wind up happening is it will wind up creating a brand new directory here. So now I've got things buried like, 5 levels deep, which is not really what I want typically. So just get yourself into that habit of Django admin, start project, Django pets, and then just hit enter. It's not a valid name. Fine. How about Django pets without the dash? There we go. Okay, cool. Hello everybody. The activity bar on the right is tripping me out. I hope in a good way. Yeah. Okay. So let me come back over here into my code, and let's explore what we've got here. So what we've got up at the very top here is my manage.py file. And my manage.py winds up becoming the core entry point into my application, so that everything that we're going to be doing is actually all going to be done through manage.py. So, Mike, nice to see you over there. I hope you and your family are staying well. Okay, so okay. So the question was stuck on the activate command. How do you execute that in Windows? That's actually going to be off of venv scripts. activate. It's in a slightly different folder. So it's vem scripts activate. And you can actually see that on the Python website, but that's how you do that in Windows. And I do want to highlight the fact that everything that I'm doing here today can be done on Windows. So don't think, oh, I have to install Linux or anything like that. Not at all. You can absolutely do all of this in Windows as well. I just like to do this in Linux. Okay, so let's come back over here to our manage Pi, and as you can see right up at the very top, and I like a lot of the built-in comments here, is it tells us, hey, this is the command line utility for doing admin tasks. And you're going to notice one big call out right here, which is this call out to a little thing called, in my case, Django pets.settings. So what is Django pets.settings? I'm so glad you asked. So Django pets.settings is actually referring to this little file here called settings.py. And settings.py, as you might imagine, just based on the name of settings, is all about the global settings for our application. And there's a lot that's in here that we want to be aware of. So for example, you're going to notice things like the installed apps. So if we go get a third-party plugin, we're going to put that into installed apps. Our middleware, things that are going to be running in the background, that's going to wind up going inside of here. Our database, that's going to wind up, of course, being updated when we move away from SQLite and into something like MySQL or SQL Server or whatever it is. And you're also going to notice that there's a lot of great links to documentation here. So if I open up that little link here, and I'm going to throw that up into my browser, you're going to notice right here that it takes me right to the doc on databases. So I can see everything that I can now go in and configure with our databases and so forth right there. And that's something I really do like about this settings file, is it has a lot of links that will point me right to the doc, so I can figure out, okay, well, what is this setting doing? Now, there are a couple of very important settings that I want to call out right away, because they are going to be a little bit problematic. And that is these two items right here of secret key and debug. So secret key, you know, the name kind of gives it away here, that this is going to be a secret key. This is going to be something that we want to protect, you know? You're going to notice that this is hard-coded right in. Now, the secret key is going to be used for things like encrypting our cookies and other like behind-the-scenes security things for Django. So we do want to make sure that we protect this. It's hard-coded in by default, mostly just because Django needs to do something here. It needs to have this key, so it hard-codes this in. We're going to need to offload that, and we're going to do that here in just a couple of moments with .env. The other thing is debug, and as you might suspect with debug, that's going to give like a little bit of additional information about what's going on behind the scenes when things break. So it really is give me 1 second here. Blank. There we go. Okay, so the little debug, if the application fails or anything like that, then what's going to wind up happening is it's going to give a debug screen, which could potentially give a bit too much information about what's going on inside of your application. And so it could give a hacker a little bit of insights onto how to attack your application. So obviously none of that is good. So yeah. So we want to make sure that we offload that, and I'm going to show that off in just a second. I do want to answer a real quick question though that popped up in the chat, which was, did we already install it? We did. So this was inside of requirements.txt, that call out to Django. And when we did the pip install, it then installed Django. So that's how we installed that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit then about how to offload that. And I'm going to do this by using .env. Import load.env, and then I'm going to say load.env. Okay, so here's what's going on. So .env is going to give us the ability to offload key values into a little file over here that we're going to call creatively .env. Now, what this little command right here is going to do from that .env package is it's going to look for a file called .env. It's going to take all the values that are inside of there and set them as environmental variables, which is fantastic. But what's also wonderful about .env is that if we do set an environmental variable, which we'll do when we get into app services or wherever it is that you happen to be deploying it, then the actual environmental variable that you set would override anything that's here. So what's great about this is that I'm going to be able to write my code and know that this will be able to read the appropriate value regardless of where our application is going to be running. So the end file is like Docker Compose. Yeah, you could absolutely see it that way. Is .env just a text file? It is. Which does lead me to kind of the next point here is let's talk a little bit more about security. So I'm going to be putting potentially sensitive information into this text file. And so there is a little bit of okay, well, what's going to be the appropriate level of security for me? Well, the couple of values that I'm going to be providing inside of here are not going to really be attackable per se, because it's just going to be running here on my system. But if I was going to be storing username, password for a database that I cared about, or things like that, then I would really want to go one step further here and potentially encrypt this file. And if you head on out to the interwebs, you will find a whole bunch of different packages that will give you that ability to do like some streamlined encryption and things like that. And I would also highlight the fact that Azure does offer a really nice key vault to manage all of that as well. In my case, I'm not overly concerned. I want to make sure that I'm doing this properly, which is why I am using .env. But the fact that this is going to be a text file on my local system, this is not going to be deployed, is going to be okay with me. Still not necessarily the highest level of security, but it's going to be a good enough level of security. I'm going to be okay with this. All right. So let's go ahead and save my manage Pi. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to please use dark mode. Light attracts bugs. That's funny. I like that. That's hilarious. Yes, this is all going to be recorded. Okay. Let me go ahead and say secret key equals. And there's a couple of special characters in here that are just throwing things off. So I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup on those. That's all fine. Cool. Okay. What the secret key actually is really doesn't necessarily matter as long as there's some level of uniqueness to it. So the fact that I got rid of a couple of characters isn't going to impact anything. So let's say get env and then secret key, just like that. Okay, same thing with our debug. I'm going to go ahead and for right now say debug equals true. And let me go back over here, and I'm going to say os.get env and then debug. Okay, cool. So now I've properly offloaded those out to .env. By the way, there's like some landscaping and things that are going on behind the scenes here. I don't know if anybody can hear that bit of background noise, but I do apologize for that. There's a question here that asks, so the web server is not serving .env in case someone wants to get it right, so it's still secure enough. Okay, so one big thing that we're going to wind up doing here is we're eventually going to set up a git ignore file. And on our git ignore, one of the first things that we're going to list is going to be that .env. So this .env file is going to stay right here locally on my system. It's not going to go. It's not going to go anywhere else. It's going to stay right here. When we go to push this out to production, so let's say we're going to push this out into app services, then what we're going to do. Let me see. I just want to see if I can find. Yeah, here we go. I think this is. Yeah, here we go. There we go. So yeah, so I just pasted in a real quick doc file here that talks about app configuration. And so what app configuration will allow me to do is to set environmental variables inside of the application itself. So now app services is going to protect those values for us. So nobody will be able to access those unless they have username and password for your website. And by your website, I mean for your Azure account. And I would say at that point, you've got other problems. Like if somebody's able to access your Azure account, yeah, you've got other issues there. So yeah. I love the comments on the themes there. Okay. So yeah. All right. So let's head back over here to our settings pie. We've now got our secret key and our debug set up here. Now I could actually run my site. If I say Python 3, there we go, manage.py run server, hit enter. It's going to go ahead and run my server for me. And if I open up my browser here, what you're going to notice is, voila, I now have my app up and running. There we have it. So we've created a Django site. Woohoo! But of course, it's not doing anything yet, and that's going to be the next part here. So let's get it to do something. So I'm going to go ahead and close that little window out. I'm going to go ahead and stop my server. And now let's go ahead and now create the second part here, which is going to be our app. So I'm going to say Django admin start app. And this is going to be, I'm going to call this adoption. Okay. So let's talk a little bit then about what an app is in Django. An app is going to be a spot in which all of our code is going to actually now run. So this is where we're going to create, for example, our models. This is going to be our data. This is going to be what it is that we're going to be working with. It's also going to contain our views. So this is where we're going to indicate what it is that we want to have happen when people connect to our site, what code it is that we want to run in response to things. We're going to have a great little admin page that we're going to be able to use here. And you're going to notice eventually here that we're going to register all of our models inside of here. And then last but not least is going to be this apps.py. And this is now what we're going to use to register this inside of the project. So there's a question about when to split apps into two, and that gets really tricky. I'm trying to remember. I want to say that there's a nice little doc on that. Just sort of looking here. Yeah, I know that it exists. I can't remember where it is off the top of my head. It's a great question though. So in a nutshell, for almost everything that you're going to be doing, one app is going to be just fine. That the main reason that you would create multiple apps is because I need some level of separation of memory, typically because I'm concerned about security. So if I maybe have like a couple of different things going on and I just need to ensure that nothing from here is ever touching anything over here or vice versa, then I could go in and set that up as two separate apps. But for the most part, you're going to be just fine creating one app. So start there, and typically you're not going to have to go in and do anything else there. There's a question here: do I have a preferred database when working with Python? Not really. I like MySQL. I really love SQL Server, but I will also admit that when you go in and start poking around for plugins and drivers and things like that that work with SQL, you sometimes have to dig a little bit more than you would for MySQL. So for example, if we go in and we take a look at the databases here, and I bring up where is, I think actually this might have been the right one. Yeah. Nope, that wasn't the one that I want. There is a doc that I want. Here it is, supported databases. Yeah, so if you go in and take a look at like the supported databases, for example, inside of Django, what you're gonna notice is the fact that it's got Oracle, it's got MySQL, it's got MariaDB, and it's got Postgres. SQL isn't listed here, which is not to say that SQL does not work with Django. It does. It's just that you have to go out and get a third-party plugin to actually make it all work. It does work, but there's just a little bit of extra work that needs to be done here. Okay. Was the ViewPy automatically generated from the run app command? And the answer to that is yes. That when the start app command, that when I set up the start app, it automatically created that views for me. Granted, it didn't put anything in there, but it did in fact fill that up. How Django queries the SQL and how it does its magic. So I'm going to up-level that question. So the question is, how is it that Django is going to communicate with the database? And the answer is, it just does it. It is possible to actually see what that SQL is, and it will automatically generate that SQL much in the same way that if I'm using something like Mongoose, it'll automatically create the appropriate MongoDB calls, or if I'm using something like Entity Framework, it'll automatically create the SQL calls, etc. I can go in and I can actually see that, but for the most part, I really don't need to. Like, I can just let it do its magic and then not worry about it. If it is becoming maybe a bit of a performance issue or things like that, then I can start to take a little bit more control over those specific items. But for the most part, it's going to get it right. So my basic plan of attack is I don't worry about what the SQL is. I only worry about it when it starts to become a problem, and then I'll start to dig in and figure everything else out. Okay. So let's get this app registered here. So I'm going to go back over to my settings pie, and then on the installed apps here, I'm going to go ahead and register my adoption app. Adoption config, just like this. So you might be wondering, first of all, where's adoption config coming from? Well, if I open up that apps.py file again, what you're going to notice right here is there is that adoption config. So if I take a look over here at the code structure, I'm just zooming way in. Anybody who likes a dark theme is now getting a lot more white. But what you're going to notice, adoption, apps.py, and then adoption config. And so this is where I'm now referencing that. So just because you create an app inside of a Django project doesn't automatically register the app. That you actually have to put that in there, which sometimes throws people the first time that they see it. But that's that is what you have to do. Okay, cool. So we've got our site now bootstrapped, and now we're ready to start doing a little bit of work here. We're now ready to start creating our initial models here. So let's open up inside of adoption this models.py file. And this right here, I think is the first great thing, among many great things about Django, is the fact that I can very quickly define what my data is going to be, what my data is going to look like. So let's chat for a second here. Django gives me a built-in ORM, or what's known as an object relational mapper. And what this is going to do for me is it's going to give me the ability to create objects in the language of my choice, in my case Python, that's then going to be translated to use a database behind the scenes. This exists all over the place. This is what Entity Framework is all about in .NET. This is what Mongoose is all about in Node World, etc. By the way, I want to just real quick side note, if we want to get overly pedantic, yes, Mongoose isn't technically an ORM because there's no relational, because after all, Mongoose is a NoSQL database, but colloquially, I think we're okay with just referring to Mongoose as an ORM, that it's going to act as a middle layer between my application and my database. Yeah, so whatever it is that you might want to call it, that's fine. I just globally call everything an ORM, and we'll move on from there. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to start to set up my my app, and I'm gonna keep it a little bit simpler here. I'm gonna just create two classes here. I'm gonna create one class that I'm gonna call Shelter, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to inherit from model, and what model is going to give to me is a lot of built-in functionality, a lot of built-in capability to automatically now act as that front end to my back-end database. We're also going to see that it's going to give me the ability to do queries and things like that. Now, I want to define my data structure here. So if I'm talking about a shelter, it might have a name, for example. Now, my name is going to be some data type. And you might be wondering, okay, well, what data type is it that we might have here? So let me bring up one more time here the docs. And if I scroll down to the model layer here, here's the field types. And as I scroll down into the field types, here's the main spot that I want you to notice is that we've got things like binary field. So for, just a bit value. We've got things like char fields, which as we're going to notice is going to be a single value. We've got things like choices. We've got things like floats. We've got things like images, etc. So I can go in and now define what I want my data to look like. So in the case of a a name, this would just be a single value, or a single line value rather. So this is just going to be a car field or char field, depending on whether or not you pronounce that ch as hard or soft, which is sort of like having the GIF debate. I personally say GIF hard G, but at the same time, I also find myself typically saying char field, even though I know it's short for character. So I really should be calling it a car field, but I don't know. I still say char field. Anyway. That's just me. Now I can now start adding in all sorts of different bits of validation here. And this is actually a really important security thing where, let me open up char field here. And you're going to notice that it has the one requirement here of max length. And then if you start to kind of poke around a little bit, you can start to see all the different validators and so forth that are available to you inside of Django. One very big thing is the fact that we want to make sure that we're always validating our data. Like one big security thing when you're working with data that's going to be input by the general populace into your application is we want to make sure that they're putting in the right data. And this is both from a security perspective to make sure that we're only getting the values that we want, but this is also from a data cleanliness standpoint that Megan, for example, does an awful lot of like data science and those types of things. And she will tell you the amount of time that data scientists wind up spending having to go in and clean and cleanse data because people weren't as careful as they should have been about making sure that all the data that was coming in was in fact valid. So we want to make sure that we specify this. We're also going to notice later on when we start to create forms and so forth, and this will be a later session that we'll wind up doing, is that we can read these validators so that way we can do client-side validation as well. So validation is a really important point when you're working with data. And so fortunately, that is actually built right in here. And so I can also go in and say something like this, where I'm not going to allow this to be blank. I'm going to be a little bit lazy here with my address, and I'm just going to set this up as a text field, which is just multiple lines of text. And I'm doing that just because it's just going to be something simple here. So I'm just going to say max length of, let's say 1,000, and then I'm also going to set that up as blank equals false. Okay. So now let's go ahead and say class pet, and we'll say models model. And let's go ahead and say, for example, like the name of the pet, models char field. And then we'll go ahead and say max length of, let's say 50, 40, whatever it is that comes off of my fingers there. We'll say blank equals false. And then maybe breed. And, you know, this is where, and I'm just going to kind of pause here, that you could really start to dig a lot deeper into the different options here. So there is, hold on one second here. I want to find, sorry, I'm looking for one particular, yeah, here we go. One particular doc. Chugga. And this is the key that I want. Okay, so I want to highlight here just kind of real quick the fact that if you want to go in and specify particular choices, you could go in and do that. And you could really do this in one of a couple of different ways. So for example, I've got breed here. And if you think about like breeds of dogs, there could be an awful lot of ways that you might want to go with this. Like one very simplistic way that we could do this is we could provide a list of choices here. And that's the example that it's giving you here, where it's just a basic list of choices. So the year in school, you could either be a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, graduate. And this works really well, this type of choice where you're hard coding it. If you know that this is something that is literally never going to change, or that it's so unlikely that it's going to change that I'm okay with having to go back in and update the code later on to have to deal with that. There's also a little bit of a performance boost here because it doesn't have to go back to a database and go get that from there. You could also, if you want to, start to create some form of a relationship. So for example, one thing that you have the ability to do is to set up a many-to-many relationship. And this is probably going to be the best option. I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. Hey, again, we're really cooking here on the show, so I'm literally making this decision right now to go down this path. So one more time, I don't guarantee that this is going to work successfully for us, but when you think about, for example, our problem space, which is shelter pets, typically these are going to be some form of a mutt. They're going to be some form of a dog that's going to have multiple breeds. So we might want that opportunity to be able to select multiple. On top of that, if we think about breed and we're thinking about creating this website, we might want to add on a little bit more information. Like we might want to be able to add on things like description, things like average weight, etc., and be able to update that and so forth. So maybe having breed back here, I'm just going to go into code as a separate class. And I see there's a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to get to those in just a second here. And I'll say name, models, char field, and I'm just going to say max length equals 50, blank equals false. There we go. And then now I could come down here and say models, and then many-to-many field. And then now let's go ahead and set that up as our breed, just like that. And so now I've created that many-to-many relationship where one dog can have multiple breeds. Our dog is part Amstaff, part Lab, part Boston Terrier, part who knows what. So we could go ahead and have that, and then obviously multiple dogs can share the same breed. So now I've got that set up, and then I can also go in and say shelter, lowercase s. Equals models, foreign key, and this is going to be our shelter, and then I'm going to say on delete equals models protect. Okay, cool. All right, there's been a lot of questions over here. Let's see, just trying to get caught up. Not supposed to use text field. Okay. So the difference between text field and car field or char field is single line versus multiple line. So a text field would be nice for something like a description. So if I was doing this, maybe I said description equals models dot text field. That would be perfect for that. That would be perfect for something like description where I want multiple, but a char field is perfect for when I want single line. So something like name and title and street address and city and all that good stuff. So that's really it. Okay. Oh, yeah. So can it be a specific field type for some type of a database? And the answer to that is yes. Let me come back over here. If I go into like Postgres specific features, you're going to notice that there's actually a lot of different options that are available to you if you are using Postgres, because it does have a lot of that built-in JSON support. So if you are using Postgres, then you can get some additional options here. Okay, cool. All right. So there is my basic model set up here. So I've got my shelter, I've got my breed, and I've got my pet. Okay. So let's go ahead and make sure that all of that is saved. And now let's start setting up my database here. So we've got our initial models. So we'll go ahead and check that. And then now let's go ahead and turn our attention to our initial database. Now, when you're talking about Django, you can actually use any, really any type of database it is that you might want behind the scenes. So if you want to use Postgres, if you want to use Oracle, if you want to use SQL Server, if you want to use MySQL, all of those will work fine. Here's the catch with all of those though. They're all going to require that you go in and set up a server and connect to it and all of that. And that's not great when we're doing development work. That when we're doing development work, that we really want to make this as streamlined as possible. And this is where SQLite comes into play. And in fact, by default, Django supports SQLite. That's actually the default database that it's going to use here. And SQLite is wonderful because it's just a file. That's really all that there is to it. So it's lightweight. It doesn't require any setup, etc. Now, it's not going to be exactly like a database. You're going to notice it highlights a couple of things here that SQLite does that other databases don't do. And one very big thing about SQLite is the fact that this is designed to be a single user database. One thread, one user, that's it. If you're doing local dev work, that's exactly what you're going to have. You're the user, just your one thread, that's it. But when you go to deploy this out to production, now you're going to have multiple users, now you're going to have multiple threads, etc. And that's where things are going to start to go sideways here. And so you will get database locked errors if you try to deploy this out to, say, Azure or Heroku or really anywhere else, because it's going to be built for multiple users. SQLite is not built for multiple users, so it will wind up failing out there. So we do need to be aware of that. But again, for what we're going to be doing, it's going to be just fine. So yeah, somebody calls out, SQLite is fine before you try to get into multi-thread. The moment you get into multi-thread, then things start to go a little bit sideways there. But for right now, it's going to be good. Okay, so let me go ahead and set this up real quick. So I'm going to say Python 3 manage.py, and I'm going to say make migrations. Now, before I hit enter here, let me sneak back over to the doc just because I want to show off this little item right here. So this is the second page of the tutorial, and it introduces things like migrate and make migrations and so forth. Migrations in any ORM platform is all about getting your database up to date. It's all about getting your database ready. So let's go back real quick here to our code. And what I want to highlight on here is the fact that we've now created 3 new classes. We created shelter, we created breed, we created pet. Eventually, we want those inside of a database. So basically, we want 3 tables. We want shelter and breed and pet. And I could go in and create those on my own. And again, if you go take a look at the Django docs, it will actually kind of show you how you could create the database on your own and then go ahead and connect Django to it. But that's not really the way that Django is built. Django is really built to give you the ability to modify and work with the database directly through Django. And it does that through migrations. So I'm just going to make migrations here. It will look at my code and go, hey, we've now got a couple of brand new items here for breed and shelter and pet. And in fact, you're going to notice that it even generates the Python code on how to go in and set all of that up. And so you'll notice, for example, that it's already adding in an ID or a primary key field for us. You'll notice that it's automatically setting this up as an auto field, so an auto count field. And eventually, this is going to be converted into the appropriate SQL. And it will be converted into the appropriate SQL for the database that I'm going to. So if I'm going to MySQL, if I'm going to SQLite, it will convert it to the SQL that's appropriate for that, which is fantastic. So there's a question here, should I even spend time learning SQLite or just move on to fill in the blank here? Honestly, just go learn a different database. SQLite is not something you're typically going to go in and like write queries against and things like that. That it's a great testing database that you would use for something like this. It's typically not one that you're going to be firing up a query tool. So yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to make my my database by just simply saying Python 3 manage py migrate, and then voila, it now ran a whole bunch of code here. And you might be looking at this and going, wow, that's a lot of migrations. Where did it get all of them from? I just made one. Well, a lot of these are actually built into Django. That if you take a look here, you're going to notice that there's things like admin. More on that in just a couple of minutes. You're also going to notice that there's things like content types, and you're going to notice there's a lot for handling auth. Django has built-in authentication authorization. So if you want to allow users to access your site using usernames and passwords, there's literally nothing else that I need to add to my application outside of an initial registration page. And then obviously start to mark pages as requiring login or not requiring login and so forth. But otherwise, all of that's built right in. If you want to incorporate something like Microsoft authentication, maybe Facebook auth, Twitter auth, etc., you can do that. And there's a lot of great places, there's a lot of great packages that will allow you to do that. And we're going to explore that a little bit later. So that's where all of that comes into play. There's a question there, is there any way to see the database tables? And there is. There's a little browser. There's a SQLite browser. Let me see if I can't real quick. SQLite browser. Yeah, here you go. Yeah, there's actually a little SQLite browser that will allow you to go ahead and explore the tables and see all of that. Okay, cool. So now that I've created all of that, let's go ahead and just real quickly kind of see all of this behind the scenes. And I want to just set up a shell for Django here. So I'm going to say Python 3 manage.py shell, and then I'm going to say from adoption models import, and I'm just going to grab my shelter here, just because that was sort of the simplest one. And then I'm going to say shelter equals shelter name equals just going to make up a name here. Okay. Don't worry, I'm going to talk about what I'm doing here in just a second. All right. Just kind of moving that up here. Okay, so let's talk about what I did. First up, one of the things that you can do with Django is just get a shell for Django. And this gives you the ability to basically just play in Django land, if you will, and be able to modify items and so forth. And the big thing that you're able to do inside of here is you're able to now play with that Django ORM, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. So you're going to notice right here that I've got a little bit of just normal Python. So from adoption.models, adoption, models, import shelter. And shelter, of course, is the name of one of the classes that we created. Oh, that's interesting. Huh, that should have failed. I don't know why that didn't. I'm going to go back and investigate that a little bit later. Interesting. It should have failed because I didn't give the shelter an address. Yeah, I'll have to go back and take a look at that later. Anyway, that's all right. So let's just highlight the shelter class here. So that's what I imported in. And so you're going to notice that I created this brand new shelter, and then I went ahead and I called save. And all of that is built right into Django. So I didn't have to do anything to make that happen. And so the question then sort of becomes of, okay, well, where is that being saved? What is that doing? What's going on there? I'm so glad that that you asked. Yeah, Mark says that false will fail when I'm adding the data inside the admin, which I haven't created yet, and it's actually what I'm going to. But I thought that it would fail when I do the save as well, or maybe it's SQLite that's just not that's just not failing. Yeah, maybe that's it. I don't know. I'll have to go back. I'll take another look later. Like I said, we're really cooking here. So mistakes that you're seeing are, real world things. Okay. In any event, let's go ahead and exit out of this. And I'm just going to clear my screen, and I'm going to go back into Python 3 manage.py, and I'm going to say create super user. Has to be pronounced like that. Super user. So let's talk a little bit about working with Django data after a little coffee. So I mentioned at the outset here, we're not launching rockets here. That whatever it is that we're trying to do, somebody else has already done. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a CRUD application, create, retrieve, update, delete, where this is now going to act as a front end to a back end database. And when you think about that type of an application, you're almost always going to need to provide some level of back-end access to that, some form of admin access to that. And anybody who's had to create that type of an application knows how tedious that can be. And that can be really tedious when you're talking about a lot of little pieces of data. So let's say that I'm just trying to create like a conference app, which is one of my biggest struggles in creating websites was actually just creating a conference app. And this was long before I discovered Django, because there's a lot of like little pieces of data that need to be worked with. So you think about like all the categories, you think about session submissions, and then people having to go back and approve those and so forth. And those are all different things that business users need to it's a lot of things that business users need to be able to do. And then I need to go in and create pages for all of those little pieces of data. I need to control permissions and so forth and so on. Django, fortunately, will allow me to do all of that without having to write that code, that it comes with a lot of this functionality built right in. And the core of all of this is going to be an admin page. Now, in order to access the admin page, I'm going to need a user. So I'm going to create a super user here. And this is going to be my, my main admin. A super user is going to have full control to do everything. So let me punch in an email address here, and then a password. Yeah, I knew I was going to fail on that. There we go. Okay, cool. So now I've created the super user. So now let's go ahead and let's rerun our site here. Thank you for tracking that down for me, Mark. I greatly appreciated that. So the question is the super user added to SQLite? It is. So if you actually opened up the SQLite database, you would notice that there's a users table inside of there, and it would be saved into there. The biggest place, though, that we're going to see this is actually going to be right here. So let me bring up, where did you put it? Okay. Okay. Give me 1 second here. Let's make sure. Yep, cool. Okay, so let me bring up the website again. So we've seen this already. But now what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to add in an admin right at the end here. And now I'm getting this Django administration. And I want to highlight the fact that I didn't create this. Well, I did, but I didn't. I didn't write any code for this. All that I did was I just set up my Django project and my Django app. And in doing that, it automatically gave me this administration page. So there was a question in here, you know, about everything that you need as far as like structure and everything else with the Django application, and sort of like the initial bootstrap work that needs to get done. And, you know, there was a question much earlier about Django versus Flask and when to use each, and what's great about Django, what's great about Flask is it's real lightweight. Like just, you know, I can just turn it on and away we go. But with Django, there's that a little bit of initial setup that I have to walk through. But now that I've done that little bit of setup, boom, I now get this admin page that somebody calls out, you know, Django really comes with batteries. It does. Here's this cool little administration page. And so now I'm just going to log on with my little Geek Trainer. I'm going to punch in my little password here. And now, let me get rid of my last pass. What you're going to notice is that it's now giving me the ability to manage users and to manage groups. Now it's giving me that because I'm a super user, because of the fact that I'm a full admin. But it's actually not just that I can manage other users and groups. Let me come back over here to my code and let me open up my admin page. And so now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say from.import models. And now I'm going to register all of my models on that admin page. And I'm going to do that by saying admin.site.register. I'm going to call out a really common mistake, one that I honestly make quite a bit. The command here is not admin.register. Instead, it's admin.site.register. It's admin.site.register. So I'm going to come back over here, admin.site.register, and I'm going to say models dot, and I'll say breed, admin site register models, and I'll say pet, and then admin site register, and then I'm going to say models and shelter. Okay. 4 lines of code. Just 4 lines of code. I save that page. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to hit refresh. And now you're going to notice that I've got breeds, I've got pets, and I've got shelters right here on my admin page. And if I open up shelters, what you're going to notice is that I've got shelter object 1. Okay, well, that's not the best name, but we'll talk about how to change that here in just a second. And when I open this, you're going to notice that I've got my little name and I've got my address field right here. How amazing is that? How cool is that? Now, I don't like this little shelter object 1. Not a problem. I can fix that. I'm going to go back over here to my models, and I'm just going to use normal Python. One of the things that you get in normal Python is this little string. So what I can do is I can just simply say return self.name. And I'll say, actually, I think, oops, I don't need the second return there. Yeah, I can do that on all 3. I'm just going to make my life a little easier here. Boom, 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 hit save. And now let's go back to my little page. Let's go ahead and hit refresh. Boom. There's my little Seattle rescue. So now what you're going to notice is that all I did was I just updated that little str. And so anytime it needs a default string, this is now what it's going to display out. That's pretty slick. That's pretty slick. Now, I also want to go back and let's create a brand new little breed. So I'll give this a name of Amstaff, incredibly sweet dog, and we'll go ahead and say save and add another, and we'll say collie, super smart, and we'll hit save. There's my collie and there's my Amstaff. Let me go back over here to adoption and let me go into pets and let me add a pet. Look at this, Amstaff and collie right there. So now I could go in and I could say, for example, Sammy, name of our dog, Amstaff, choose the shelter, boom, just like that. So there is, there's the admin site. And what's also great, and I'm just going to close off the admin site with this, is if I go into my user here, and I'm just going to open up Geek Trainer. Let me just scroll on down. What you're going to notice is that I get a lot of great control over individual permissions. So if I want to control who's allowed to add pets, view pets, etc., I can do all of that right here, which is pretty mind-boggling if you ask me. It's pretty slick. I love that. Cool. All right. So there is our little admin site, and we've also already explored the data. So I'm going to go ahead and check both of those. Now, I'm going to feel a little bit like an infomercial because honestly, this is, one of those moments where I could just, walk away and everybody would be blown away by Django. And there's very much but wait, there's more, that there's a lot of additional features and functionality that we're going to be able to take advantage of here, which is what we're going to take a look at in just a second. There was a couple of questions in here. Can I elaborate later on about pros and cons of class-based view versus function-based views and so forth? I'm actually going to come back in a few weeks, watch this space, and dig a little bit deeper into both authentication, authorization, and also into doing those types of things. So I'm not going to answer that for right now, but come back in a few weeks and we'll talk a lot more about that. Can I disable the admin page? if I don't want anybody to be able to log in, absolutely. So the admin page itself is actually nothing but a built-in app. So if I go over here to my settings.py, you'll notice on install the apps, there's that Django contrib admin. Just get rid of that. And then that will go away. So that's really all that you have to do that is just eliminate that. You could also go like a couple of additional steps further as far as like locking this down goes. So you can add in maybe like a little bit of code, say in middleware, to make sure that people are coming only from certain IP addresses. If you're using something like Microsoft Authentication through Azure Active Directory, then you could limit it so that way only people from your organization can access it, and things like that. So yeah, is this going to be saved or posted somewhere? Yeah, this will actually be available on Twitch, and we will be posting it out to YouTube as well tomorrow. Okay. When we talk about Django versus Flask, what's really the overhead? Okay. This is a great question. Boy, and I could rabbit hole on this question for quite a while, and I'm going to try my best to avoid doing this because I've only got about 35 minutes left, and there's still a couple of big things I want to try and be able to get through here. So the question is, when we talk about Django versus Flask, what's really the overhead that we're talking about here? That's a really hard question to answer, and it's a hard question to answer for a lot of different reasons. But I'm going to try and distill all of this down into one overly simplistic packaged answer, which is to say that almost everything is going to have some level of a trade-off. And quite frequently, when you're talking about goals of creating an application, you have time to market and you have performance. And in almost every application that I've ever been involved with, save for maybe one or two, time to market has always been more important than performance. Now, a lot of times when I say that, people will then sometimes come back with, oh, but performance does matter. And I'm not saying that performance doesn't matter. Performance does matter. It absolutely does. But everything has trade-offs. And on every application, except for one or two that I've ever worked on, time to market has always been more important than performance has been. So as a result, we focused in on time to market, and we managed the performance in other ways by adding more hardware, scaling, etc. So could you go in and create an application that's going to be lighter weight, that's going to be faster than everything inside of Django? Sure, very likely, but even then, it's probably going to test your development skills a little bit there. But sure, you could. But think about how much longer that's going to take you to go in and write. And that's where using something like this, or using something like Entity Framework to bring it back to the .NET world, is going to come into play. How much time will it take to learn Django if you know Flask? One nice thing about moving from any back-end framework to another is that there's a lot of core concepts that you'll have learned. So one of the biggest things that you'll have learned is things like routing, and you'll have learned like request and response and how that basic object model works and things like that. And those are true kind of universally. So if you're already familiar with Flask, then it's going to be a bit easier for you to then come in or I shouldn't say easier, it's going to be more natural for you to come in and learn something like Django. Okay. Yeah, follow the tutorial. Yeah, the tutorial is fantastic. That in a lot of ways, this is basically what I'm doing here. Is I'm basically just doing the tutorial. Yeah, yeah. The Django Girls website is fantastic. Absolutely, go take a look at that as well. Okay, cool. So let's keep on keeping on here. I'm going to create one view here from Django. Views, import, and I'm just going to say list view. Okay, and I'm just going to go with one just to make my life a little bit easier here because, again, I've only got about a half hour left and I still have a fair bit of work that I want to try and do. Like, I really want to try and get to deploy this. So if I wind up deploying a less featured app, I think that's going to be okay. So, and you'll start to see the point here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take advantage of the views that are inside of Django. So I'm coming back again to the website. This is actually spot 4 on the tutorial, and it introduces this concept of generic views. That, you know, when you think about creating a CRUD application, you're frequently looking for the exact same things. Like, I want to be able to display the data, or I want to be able to display an individual item. I don't want to have to constantly go in and create code for all of that. I want to be able to just let something else do it. And this is where the generic views come into play, is that they will allow you to do exactly that. So I'm going to say class index view, and I'm going to say list view. So I'm going to make this of type list view. And I'm going to set up two items here. The first is going to be my context object name, and this will be my pets, and then I'm gonna say def get query set. Curious why that didn't auto populate. Weird. Okay. Anyway, so I'm gonna say return, and then I'm gonna say from okay. So let's talk a little bit about this. I'll show my admin pie in a minute. Django packages. Yeah, Django packages is another great resource. I highlighted that last time, but Django packages is fantastic. Will this be on GitHub? It will. I don't know where it's going to reside, but it will eventually wind up on GitHub. MongoDB support. There is a, so it's not baked in, but there is a couple of plugins that will give you the ability to do that. Okay, so let's talk about this, and this will also answer another question that's in chat. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a list view where I'm going to display a list of items. And so what this is going to be looking for is this is going to be looking for two main items. The first is going to be what data is it that we want to display. In my case, I'm just going to display all the pets. I only have just like a couple in there, so I'm okay listing them all. Probably not great for like real world, but I'm okay with this for a simple demo. And then, you know, we'll come back to this in a future episode and expand upon this. And then right here, I'm going to go with pets. And with this, what this is going to do is set what the name is going to be inside of the template HTML that we're going to be using. Because of the fact that I'm doing this as a list view, I need to provide what the query set is, and that's why I'm not setting the model type. If I was going to be setting up a details view, you not? You're making me nervous, Visual Studio Code. Huh. All right. Well, for some reason, Visual Studio Code is not. It's not giving me a lot of confidence. Yeah. Use PyCharm. Yeah. No. I should be clear. I'm not saying Visual Studio Code in general makes me nervous. I'm just saying it's making me nervous right now, just because it's not picking up my my IntelliSense. So I don't know if it's because I'm doing something wrong or if there's just something that's not working quite quite the way that I'm expecting it to. But anyway, if you're doing an individual view, then I would want to go ahead and do it this way. So I'm going to say context object name equals pet if I was doing an individual view. That's what I would do. Okay. In any event, let me just bring up, oh, no errors. Okay, that's good. All right. Cool. It could be solved in dark mode. That's funny. You made me laugh. Okay. Let's go ahead and set up our templates here. I'm going to set up a brand new template for my adoption, and I'm going to I want that to be a folder. Delete. Adoption, and then I'm going to call this my okay, pet list HTML. All right, so here's the eventual goal here. The eventual goal is to create a page where I'm going to be able to see all of my pets. And I'm going to do this by setting up a template. So I'm going to go HTML. I'm going to go head. I'm going to go title, and I'm going to say pet adoption, and then I'm going to say body, and then I'm going to say h1 adopt don't shop, and then I'm going to say ul. Okay, so very basic HTML page, admitted. What I want to do inside of here is I want to display out all of my all the pets that we have listed here, which right now is just going to be one. It's of course the best pet because it's Sammy. It's ours. So let's go ahead and set up a for loop. Boop, bloop. For pet in pets. And bloop, and then I'm going to li bloop bloop sound effects help pet.name bloop bloop, and I'm gonna go n4. Okay, so let me pause for just a second here. So let me pause for just a second here. There, it's dark mode for a minute. Let's highlight what we've done here and kind of what's going on. So what we're doing here is we are building out an HTML page that's now going to be the template for listing out all of our pets. You're going to notice that we've got the title, you're going to notice that we've got our H1, and then you're going to notice that we've got a little bit of funky syntax here. And the main thing about our syntax here is you're going to notice the curly %. The curly % is going to indicate that we're going to run some form of code. It's going to be sort of Python-ish, but obviously there's going to be a little bit of difference. You'll notice, for example, like end 4, which doesn't exist in Python, but it's basically going to run a little bit of code. This right here is sort of like a normal for loop in Python. So for every pet in pets, we'll then go ahead and do something. And then this set of curlies right here is just going to do like a response write, where it's just automatically going to print out whatever the value is inside of there, which in my case is going to be the name. So sort of like a response write or a document write, if you will. There's a couple of questions in the chat about, hey, you know, what is this that we're seeing here? And the templates that you're seeing here is something that's actually very similar to Jinja. So if you're familiar with Jinja, or honestly, if you're really familiar with almost any inline code HTML that that you might have, all of that's going to be very similar. So while this isn't necessarily Jinja directly, this is a Django specific template system, it's going to be very similar to Jinja. And it's worth highlighting here that you can go in and, oh no. Am I back? Hopefully I'm back. Maybe. Okay, it sounds like I'm back. All right, I'm gonna keep going. Okay, cool. So welcome to everybody from Visual Studio. Thrilled to have you here. We're going through. We're just poking around on Django. So the question that I was answering here was about the template system. I want to highlight the fact that Django uses its own template system, but if you're familiar with Jinja or you're familiar with pretty much anything where you're doing some level of code and HTML together, all of this should feel pretty familiar to you. There's sort of nothing new under the sun. Dark mode taking up too much bandwidth. Yeah, for everybody that's coming over from Visual Studio, the two things that I want to highlight here. Number one is that I'm doing Django rather than ASP.NET, and then the second thing that I want to highlight is that there's an ongoing debate about dark mode or light mode. So right now we're on dark mode. That might change. Stick around, see what happens. Okay, in any event, so there is there's our little template here. Let me go ahead and register that. So I'm going to say urls.py. I'm going to say from Django urls import path, and I'm going to say app name equals adoption. I'm going to say URL patterns. And this URL patterns is a convention. So what's eventually going to happen here is I'm going to register this outside on my project, and that will make this then globally available. This URL patterns is going to be it's going to be a convention. It's going to be a pattern, and that's what I'm going to be setting it to. Now, what I need to do is indicate what code it is that I want it to run for just a blank entry. And I'm going to do that by saying from.import our views, and then I'm going to say views, index view as view. And I'm going to call this index. See, it was me, it wasn't Visual Studio Code. See, this is one of the big things that that you should always be on the lookout for. When your IDE isn't behaving the way that you expect it to, 9 times out of 10, it's your fault, not the IDE's fault. Yes, sometimes the IDE fails. Sometimes, yes, you need to close and reopen. But a lot of times, if you're not getting IntelliSense and things aren't behaving the way that you expect it to, then, you know, make sure that you've got everything right. I wasn't right. I didn't have generic here. And so earlier, you may have noticed that I paused when I said def, and then I said get, and then I wasn't getting IntelliSense there. That worried me. And I was right to be worried because I didn't have it right. So models, pet, objects. Oh, there we go. Okay. Cool. All right. So now let's come back over here to my URLs. This should now give me IntelliSense. Yep, that's exactly what I wanted. All right, cool. So now I'm going to move just a little faster here. Let's go ahead and get that registered. And I register that by using include. So I'm going to say path. And then I'm going to go ahead and say include and conference URLs. Okay. So let's see. My site should still be up and running. It is. And oh, sorry. See, now I'm just doing a little bit of debugging behind the scenes here. I've got something that I didn't do quite right. Again, we're really cooking here. So mistakes happen. Uh-oh. What did I not do? Give me 1 second here. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. The Industrial Revolution was neither industrial nor a revolution. Discuss. I want... name equals, no, it should be lowercase. That's right. Oh, yeah, name equals, thank you. That's what I did wrong. Thank you. Good call out. There we go. Okay. I appreciate the debugging help. See, this is one great advantage to writing live code with an audience is you get automatic debug help. So there we have it. So now what you're going to notice is if I bring back up my browser here, you're going to notice that sure enough, we have our root page here, adopt, don't shop. There we have our little Sammy girl, and voila, I've now got my full-blown page. Now, I want to bring this back to the code, and then we'll go in and do deployment here. What I want to highlight is the fact that in my view, I really just wrote 4 lines of code. That I've got my basic class, I've got my object name, get my query set, and then whatever my query is going to be. That's it, and voila, I've now got a cool list. So really, this is limiting the amount of code that I would have to go in and create. And again, if I, yeah, there's my view. Sorry, I didn't have Visual Studio up. There's my view. And if I open up the HTML, you know, all of this right here, that pets is being passed in and so forth, real, very little code for me to go in and update all of that. And then last but not least, and I want to highlight this admin page again, like I got that admin page in a total of 3 lines of code. So that's really the whole goal of Django, is just to try and make it easier for me to go in and create my site. Okay, now then, let's talk a little bit about doing deployment here. So what I want to do is I want to update one thing right away, and I'm purposefully going to make a mistake here. I'm purposefully going to forget something. So I'm going to say allowed host equals 127.1. Okay. And let me come over here to my settings.py file. Okay. So what I want you to notice on my settings.py is the fact that I have my I have a little spot for allowed hosts. And by default, if I don't set anything up inside of my allowed hosts, what's going to wind up happening is it will just automatically do 127.0.0.1. Now, when I go to deploy this out to Azure, I need to make sure that everything is running properly inside of Azure. So I'm going to need to update this allowed hosts for when we get out to production. So the little bit of setup work that I did is I created an environmental variable, and I'm just going to read that in. So I'm going to say os.getEnv, and I called this allowed host, which I'll go in and set up in just a couple of moments. So there is that. So I want to make sure that that I've got that. There's also going to be another little error message that's eventually going to come up here that I'm going to highlight that will be about static root, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. You could go in and do allow everything. Please don't do that. Not necessarily the best of ideas. Don't do that. Okay, so I need to create a couple of resources. What I need is somewhere on Azure to host this, and I also need a database on which to host it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all of that through a neat little command line utility that you too can have called azhack. So what azhack will do is it will automatically create a website and a database, if I want it to, and set up Git deployment, all in one nice neat little line. So I'm going to say azhack create. I'm going to specify a location of West US. I'm going to specify a name of Django. I'm going to specify a runtime of Python, and then a database of my SQL. And I'm going to set my output as YAML for reasons that you're going to see in just a moment. So there's a question about the Visual Studio Code extensions that I'm using. I'm honestly just using 2. I'm using the Python extension, and then I have a spell checker that I'm using as well that I really like. once this comes up. Yeah, code spell checker. So the question is, could you create a model from a pre-existing database? You can. Yeah, if you go check out the docs on Django, it does walk you through this, but I don't know that I would necessarily recommend doing it that way. That this really is built to be code first, but you could absolutely do that. Okay. Am I still here? Maybe? Okay, I'm back. So there's a couple of people that are poking at me about AWS. Could you deploy this out to AWS? Sure, absolutely. I'm deploying it out to Azure. Okay. So there's a question there of, you know, how did it pick the service plan? This is built right in to automatically set up a free free service, and then you could go back in and update it later. So there's a little thing about, hey, this is a Django topic. You're absolutely right. This is a Django topic. You can run Django on Azure. And in fact, what's happening behind the scenes, what this little command right here is doing is it's actually setting up a Linux container for me that's going to now be the host for my app. And it's also setting up a MySQL database for me to be able to use. So this is actually now doing all of this inside of Azure for me. So yeah, would I instead recommend building a new database and then import into it? I think that would really all depend on like how big the data was, how close the data was to what it was that I would want it to look like, etc. There's an awful lot to that question. Okay, now let's highlight what we've got here. So what this command did, this command automatically set up 2 main items for me. It set up an Azure website for me, and it set up a MySQL database for me. What it also did is it enabled Git deployment, and it automatically updated some fantastic app settings for me behind the scenes, which I'm going to be able to take advantage of. So there's a question in chat of, is this now going to is this now going to migrate the data for me? Sadly, it's not. I will have to go in and do that all on my own. And I'm going to show off how to do that here in just a second. Now, I am going to go a little bit baked cake here. I am going to pull cake out of the oven here, just because I don't want to type out a bunch of boilerplate code here. So I'm just going to make my life a little easier. And update my database. Okay, I'm going to talk about what it is that's going on here in just a second. Okay, cool. All right, so so here's what I've got going on. Here's what I did. So what I did is correct, yeah, that the command line utility is only going to do Azure. So here's what I did is I went in and I updated my application here to now use my my MySQL database. Now, one of the things that is worth highlighting about the MySQL that's available for me on Azure is it is automatically going to use SSL, which is exactly what I want it to do. But there is a certificate that you need to go grab in order to make that happen. If you take a look at the doc, you can go in and see how you can go in and grab SSL. There is also a firewall with MySQL, so that way nobody's going to be able to access this database unless they're added to the firewall rules. And that includes, by the way, your local system. So one of the things that you might notice about my speech pattern is that there's a little bit more pausing in it behind the scenes. And the reason for that is because behind the scenes, I'm actually updating my firewall to allow my own IP address in. So that way, the command that I'm about to run here will actually work. Okay. So there was a question earlier about, hey, how do we get our information into our database? Well, because of the fact that I've now updated this to point to that database that we now just created, I should be able to say Python 3 manage.py migrate. Oh, I need the MySQL client. Hold, please. That was one item I forgot over here. MySQL client. Let me save and let me rerun this. Okay. Thank you for joining the session. Somebody's saying thank you over there. Yeah, I need drivers. Drivers. Yeah, that was that. This was one that I forgot there. So okay. So here's what's happening is this is actually now setting up my initial database for me inside of app services. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create my super user. So I'm going to say Python manage.py create super user. And there we go, and that was created. So all of this was happening on that MySQL database that I now have up and running inside of Azure. So now what I want to do is I want to deploy. Now the catch about doing my deployment is I am going to need a gitignore file. I'm going to use probably my favorite website, which is gitignore.io. So I'm going to say .env. I'm going to say Django. I'm going to say Python. I'm going to say Visual Studio Code. Create. And this will now set up a gitignore for me. So I'm going to copy that. .git ignore. Oh, I've already got it. That's right. I created that earlier. Boom, boom, boom. Save. And my env. Oh, that's right. I need to still do my gitignore. Okay. Can I actually just go copy and paste some commands here? Actually, I'll just do it manually. Okay. Okay, so what I'm doing here, and I know that I'm moving a little bit fast. I've actually gone over time, but I want to show this on Azure. I'm just going to feel really bad if I don't get this out onto Azure. So I just want to make sure that that I finish that out. Oh, you are on the Get Ignore screen. Thank you. There we go. Bloop, and then. Give me one last second here. I just need to go grab one last piece of information. Okay, so I did a lot there. What I did is I set up a Git repository here. I added in all the appropriate files, just git add dot, did a commit. I added in Azure as a remote, and now I'm pushing it out. And in doing this push, what it's going to do is it's going to upload all of my files. And then it's going to do something truly amazing here, where it's going to automatically open up my requirements text file. It's going to install all of the packages on there, and then it's automatically going to start up my application. There's literally nothing else that I need to do to make that happen. So you can actually see this all happening behind the scenes. It's upgrading pip, because you always have to upgrade pip. It's going to perform the installation, and then eventually it's going to get my server up and running. So what's it using behind the scenes? I'm going to be honest, I don't know the answer to that question. It's using something behind the scenes. I'm not entirely certain what it is that it's using to make the magic happen there. Okay, what I do want to highlight though is if I go into my my Azure portal, I can actually see there's the app service. Here's my configuration screen. And here is all of the config settings. So if you remember, I set up an allowed host. Well, I can now add that in right here. And so now that will become available basically just as if I had put it in with that .env file. So all the settings that I would have in .env are instead going to go into that little site right there. Now, let me go to my website here. And oh, please work for me. Just looking at my application logs. It's going to be just as simple as I forgot. Secret key. Hold, please. I knew there was going to be one little step that I was going to forget. I talked about it at the very beginning. I need that secret key. Let me go ahead and grab that. give me 2 seconds here. Talk amongst yourselves. I'll give you a topic. The Industrial Revolution was neither industrial nor a revolution. Discuss. You should be running now. Secret key must not be blank. It's not blank. Unless did I misspell something? So I said that there was going to be some form of an issue that was going to happen. I didn't think it was going to wind up coming all the way at the end here, but here we are. Is there a space in front of secret key? Was there? Please don't tell me it was that silly. No, just a little bit of white space on the UI. Yeah, no space. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, no, it was absolutely worth a shot. Oh, wait. Anything different is good. This is taking it a second. There we go. Okay. You know what I think it was at the end of it all? Yeah, no. I think what it was at the end of it is it was just giving me a cached version. So the mistake was that I had forgot to update the secret key. And then I think what happened from there is it was just taking it a minute to restart. So it was just doing that to make me nervous, which it succeeded. And then that was really the issue there. So let me close all of this out. I'm now going to go into the admin page. The style sheet is not going to display. I was expecting this to happen. The fix for this is to use a little tool called white noise, which will fix this for you. I'm not going to worry too much about this for right now. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I knew that this was going to happen. This is an error message that I was expecting, and I always like, whenever I'm doing my demos, to show this happening because people run into this all the time. And there's basically two real quick steps to fix this. The first is to enable white noise, and then the second is to set up your static files root for your application. So there's a couple of things that need to happen in order to fix that issue. But it's something where if you deploy out for the first time, you just might not be expecting it. And so that's why I always like to deploy this without it. So that way you can see what happens when you deploy and you forget that. So it's still gonna work, it's just not gonna look pretty, and that's fine. So I'm gonna say Geek Trainer, my password, I'm gonna log in, and let me go ahead and add in a shelter. Hit save. I'm going to go back over here to my breeds, amstaff, super sweet. Hit save. And then I'm going to go back over here to my pets. And let's add in Sammy, who's an amstaff. There we go. Hit save. And now, if I come all the way back here, now what you're going to notice is that Sammy is there. And again, I like I said before, I was expecting that to happen. I was expecting, oh, sorry. There we go. There's your browser. Yeah, I was expecting, is my browser displaying? Oh, there we go. There's my browser. Sorry. Yeah. So here's what I want to highlight is, here's my admin page. Again, you're going to notice that the styling isn't applied. And like I said, I was expecting that. The reason for that is because of the fact that it needs static files, and I pasted in the fix to that. So this error I was expecting, but I always like to highlight this because, again, if you do this for the first time, you're going, hey, wait a minute, where's my style pages? This is why, is because you just need that. The page still functions. So you'll notice that I could go in, add in a brand new pet, artichoke, specify the breed, specify the shelter, hit save. Like, it still behaves, it's still operational. It's just not showing the style sheets. And again, it's just because I need to set up static files, and I pasted in the link on how to fix that. Cool. All right. So there is there's the deployment. So there's how you can bring all of that together. I am going to get all of this published out onto GitHub a little bit later. Like I said, this is very much the first in hopefully what'll be a series of these. That the goal of all of this is really just to go in and just kind of play around. And as you see, like, we're going to go in, we're going to make mistakes, things are going to happen. You're going to notice that we are going to highlight an awful lot of like live code and things like that. So that's really the goal, is just to have this be a bit more conversational, a bit more kind of just fun, hopefully, and hopefully that you learned as well throughout all of this. Do follow us on Twitter. Take a look at the Microsoft Reactor page on Twitter. I don't know if Megan is still out there. She should have the website handy. If you want to paste that in real quick about where you can find out more of this. This is going to be posted up onto our YouTube channel come tomorrow. This will be available on Twitch. Hopefully you had a good time. And with that, I'm going to tell you to enjoy the rest of your Thursday, the rest of your Friday, depending on where in the world you happen to be. Thanks again for tuning in, and keep an eye out for more content. Thanks again.